Today we're going to make a room spray. We're going to use Ravensara in our room spray. It's an excellent antibacterial oil. It's antibacterial and antiviral. We're not going to make any claims for what it can or can't achieve, but it doesn't hurt to spray it around rooms, your office, just to help cleanse the air. One of the most common questions we get when making a room spray is how to preserve it. It's easy for your room spray to basically go off. You'll get bacteria forming in the water, so you need a preservative to preserve your water. In this example, we're going to use sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate. It's really relatively easy because it's water soluble, so it will go into our blend just with stirring. However, there's a really important thing we need to do when using sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate, and that's lower the pH. We need to make sure the pH is under 5.5, otherwise it will fail, it's of no use at all. So just getting it down to around 4.5, 5 will make sure we're well within that. We're not applying it to the skin because it's a room spray, so we're not worrying about the effects of the skin, although 4.5, 5 is fine for certain products on the skin. This is not a worry of ours because it's just going to be in the room. To test the pH, we're just going to use some simple pH testing strips. You can find these online on eBay. They're relatively cheap and they're relatively easy to use and effective. So we'll look at it now. We're going to start with hot water, and the reason we're going to use hot water is we're going to dissolve a little citric acid in it a little later on during making this. It's a lot easier to dissolve the citric acid into warm/hot water than it is into cold water. So it's just plain water, deionized water. If we test it now, we can see on our pH testing strip that it is neutral, pH 7, which water is. So we're going to start by just adding our adding our Polysorbate 20. We use Polysorbate 20 to make the oil and water combine. This is really, really important. Lots of people just try putting oil into water, shake it. Yes, that kind of does disperse, but when it sits on the side on the shelf, the oil goes to the top, water on the bottom. When you spray it, you just get water at one time. And with the oil separated out from the water, often it will damage the sprays and the plastic, so it starts to corrode the plastic in your bottle from the spray bit. So either your sprayer stop working or you're spraying part plastic when you're spraying it out. So it's really important that your oil and water are combined. So Polysorbate 20 is an excellent thing to do that, and we're going to put it in at around 10%. So in here I've got 87 ml of hot to warm water, and I'm going to put 10 ml of Polysorbate 20. I'm just going to weigh that in. Nearly there. Right, that's that 10 ml in, and we're going to give that a stir to make sure it's completely mixed. We'll use the bottom of the spoon just because it's a little bit easier. And it's a little cloudy as you first mix it, and then starts to clear back out. I want my room spray to smell, so we're making 100 ml in total here of a room spray. I want my room spray to smell really nice and strong, so we're going to put 3 ml of Ravensara in. So Ravensara Essential Oil, it's quite a medicinal scent, but that's not the worst thing right now, of feeling that your environment's clean. So we've got 3 ml in the pipette, and we're just going to put that into there like that. And then we're going to stir that in as well. And the Polysorbate 20 will make sure our oil and water combine completely. Don't worry if things are a little cloudy now. Once you've made it and bottled it, you can put it in the fridge for around 24 hours and it will really clear it out. Just make sure it's properly stirred together. There we are. So we're going to get a pH testing strip again, and we're going to check what the pH of this is, which we would expect still to be probably around 6.5-ish mark. So if we look on our pH test here, it has lowered a little bit down from neutral 7, but it needs to go a lot further. So this is where we use a little bit of citric acid. We use the dry end of the spoon. We get our citric acid here, and we're going to add it, just sprinkle a tiny bit. It always takes a little bit of adjustment. You'll learn the amount. So if you make a note of your weights first, and then you'll learn from when you're scaling it up on batches what works for your batch. But always just be aware, batch to batch of essential oils, they change in pH. So when you first change batch of essential oil and you're making a new batch, just do a small test one find out how much citric acid needs to go in, and then scale it up if you want to make more. So we shall test the pH of that. Just be a little bit patient because it takes a little while to make sure it's fully dissolved and it's done its thing. We don't want to go a little bit too early. So we're down a little bit now. We're probably around 5.5. So we're going to put the tiniest bit extra just to make sure we're nicely under. We don't want to just scrape it in at 5.5, even though it works at 5.5, because it's better that it's a little lower, so it's nicely in the working range of sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate. Get it nicely stirred in. Once again, having hot water makes life a lot easier. We'll test that again. That's better. So now we've gone down to about just over 4. So that's perfect. So we're ready to add our sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate. Really, you just need 1% of this. So we've made 100 ml here, so 1% of 100 ml is going to be 1 ml. So I'll just tear my scales and we'll basically add a gram of sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate, which is a very little amount. And then we'll get that stirred in. And you can see gradually as this is getting more and more old, it's starting to clear. But once again, putting it in the fridge makes a massive difference if you put it in the fridge overnight. If you're not too worried, there's no harm in it being cloudy. So if you're not too worried it's cloudy and it's in a dark bottle like we're going to put it in, then that's no worry at all. But sometimes you want it clear if you're going to put it in a clear bottle. So that's it, it's ready to go. We can bottle that up now. We've ensured that our oil and water won't separate and that it's preserved and won't end up with a load of bacteria or fungus on it. You can put, if you're making this for home, obviously you don't need to make a label, but if you're making a label you need to make sure that you just put all the relevant rules on for whatever market you're making it in. But if it's for home, best to label it up anyway so you remember what it is. And it's basically ready to go. So if we just test it, there you can see it atomising in the air. And made.